Welcome, everybody. My name is Tim Atkins. My pronouns are he, him, and I serve as the Director of Lifespan Religious Exploration at the First Unitarian Church of Oklahoma City. I'm honored to be the moderator of tonight's panel, which is presented by the Oklahoma Council of Churches Religions United Committee, which is like the interfaith wing of the Oklahoma Council of Churches. Today, we're talking about how we can help welcome trans and non binary folks into our churches. And we have some wonderful panelists with us today. We have Taylor Raye, who serves as the youth organizer for Freedom Oklahoma and uses they, them pronouns. Thank you for joining us, Taylor. We have Pastor Jenny Archer from Evolve Church OKC, uses she, her pronouns. And we'd like to also welcome Kay Holladay, who is a mother of 3 adult children, 2 of whom have more rights than the third simply because he's gay. She co-founded PFLAG Norman in 1995 and serves currently on the board of directors of PFLAG National. Was a 40-year member of a Baptist church in Norman and now a current lay member and co-founder of the First Congregational Church of Norman, UCC. So I'd like to welcome Kay, Jenny, and Taylor to our panel and thank them for sharing their wisdom with us on this warm Thursday evening. I'd like to start by inviting all of our panelists to share their story with us. And let's go ahead and start with Pastor Jenny. Jenny, tell us about yourself, your work, and how you came about doing this work.
Okay. Thanks, Tim. I appreciate that introduction, and I appreciate being invited to come here this evening. Yes, this warm, I guess you could say. I'd use a little different description, but okay, a warm evening. Um, as you said, my name is Jenny, she, her, and wow, it's kind of a long, winding road. I'm not one of those people who grew up saying, I'm going to be in ministry, I'm going to be a pastor. I kind of bounced around as a kid to different, it was kind of, I grew up all over, but we ended up in Oklahoma, the middle of elementary school, and I think whatever bus ministry was coming through, my mom was eager to just get me out of her hair for a while. So I went to different churches, mostly Southern Baptist. Um, was with Awanas and all the fun stuff, and enjoyed it and learned a lot, and got older and started seeing some of the teachings I didn't appreciate even before I went through my coming out process, and started to really question a lot of things. And then fast forward later, I actually was part of a Baptist church in college, went on some mission trips telling people how God saved me from being gay and saved me from hell. I've so I've been on that other side. I did not attach to any specific conversion therapy groups, so I don't want to, overstate my involvement there. But uh, ended up realizing that I just couldn't carry that paradox anymore. Came out when I was 30-ish and left my husband of 8.5 years and just kind of moved out on my own. And of course, the church wasn't happy with that and tried to bounce around to some other churches. I still really felt a draw to God, even though I no longer understood what I thought I was supposed to know about God. But eventually got rejected enough and beaten up enough and just went through enough that I just washed my hands of the whole thing and was just done with it, and ended up at one church and then another, and finally found Expressions Church in Oklahoma City and got connected to the founder there, and again had no desire to be in ministry, but God does God stuff. And so now I am we were Evolve Church is non-denominational, but we were birthed from Expressions, and I just kind of run the joint. And our goal is just to show God's love. Everyone has different facets, everyone has even different beliefs. That's the blessing of being non-denominational. And we just love showing that God is love. And that's the important part of the church that I think is missed out a lot. But that part kept me connected to even a concept of God.
Well, thank you. Let's move over to Taylor. Taylor, tell us your story. How did you, what brought you to where you are today?
Hi everyone. Yes, so Taylor, they them. I am the youth organizer for Freedom Oklahoma. I'm on Quapaw, Caddo, Ochese Sacawam, Cherokee, Kickapoo, and Osage land. I'm actually in Cherokee Nation here with you today, and that is my people. I'm Cherokee. I'm Two Spirit, and I would say that Freedom Oklahoma is centered on 2S LGBTQ plus advocacy, more specifically lived equity for all Oklahomans, especially centering 2S LGBTQ plus Oklahomans in that work. My role specifically is centered on giving youth and young adults the tools and resources and access that they need to make changes and change policies within their own communities, to give them the platform that they need to make the work happen that they know needs to happen, since they're there living it day to day. And as far as my own personal journey, I would say that I grew up in Oklahoma. I'm from Oklahoma, so a lot of my family has been a part of the Christian faith. I would say that for me, that wasn't particularly my journey. Spirituality is really important to the work that I do, and it is really important to have that connectedness across identities, across faiths, even. I would say mine is more connected to how we are connected versus a specific idea of what God or Creator looks like. But I know what that struggle looks like for 2S LGBTQ plus people, and I've also seen the power of how it can restore faith and hope and heal for people that do find God or find church or find faith in that way, and how it's important to them. So I'm happy to be here today. Thank you so much.
And thank you for being here as well. Let's move over to Kay. Kay, we'd love to hear from you. Tell us about yourself, your story of how you got to where you are today.
Wow, that it's mine. My story is about as convoluted as Jenny's is. I was raised in the Disciples of Christ Church, which is a fairly moderate church in its viewpoint. My husband was raised in the Southern Baptist Church in Duncan, Oklahoma. We got married right out of high school and uh, came to OU as young marrieds and had started having our family. And we had joined a fairly moderate Baptist church here in Norman. And fast forward about 18 years or 16 years, our son, David, one of our three fabulous kiddos, came out when he was in high school, Norman High School. And of course, we were entrenched in this Baptist church for 40 years. I was in leadership, taught Sunday school, David sang in the choir. Um, and the pastor and staff were great. They were very supportive of our family, our entire family, and they loved David. But not so much in the Sunday school classes, and not so much at Falls Creek, and not so much when the Southern Baptist Convention met every single year to denounce people who are LGBTQ plus. So the hurt runs pretty deep. Jenny, I felt your pain as you were talking about your story. Um, yeah, it's okay. So we left we left that Baptist church because we just couldn't take it anymore. It felt hypocritical having a gay son and loving him more than our own lives, and staying in a church that just didn't know how to behave. So we left that church to start and open an affirming church in Norman. And that was in the planning stages. And we left that venture when it was known to us that the funders didn't really want a gay church in Norman. So it was like, I like to say we've been kicked out of a lot of good churches. um, then we started searching for a place because we're, like a lot of people, we're spiritual. We're not, I don't call myself a religious person, but I have that streak of spirituality and was looking for a faith home. So we had heard about Mayflower and Robin Myers, made a trip up to Oklahoma City, 45 minutes, and sat in the pew when Robin was giving a sermon. And I sat there and cried uncontrollably for about 30 minutes because I couldn't believe that I had found a place where I could think and worship in the same place, and a place where actually my son could have gotten married if he chose to do that. So it was home. Um, and with that background, that's the reason why I became a PFLAG mom. And in 1995, along with another mom and two gay guy friends of hers, the four of us started PFLAG Norman chapter. And I've been a PFLAG mom ever since, currently serve on the national board. And although PFLAG is not affiliated with any religious organization, we know that so many of us, our families, our family members have been hurt by organized religion. And that's why I do the work that I do through PFLAG, because there was no PFLAG for us when David came out. Um, there are tons of resources on pflag.org about transgender, non-binary issues. They even have a faith booklet for folks working through those. And so that's why I do the work I do. And that's why my husband and I were part of the co-founders of First Congregational UCC here in Norman. I like to tell folks that if this church doesn't work out, I'm just going to worship in my backyard.
Nice. And thank you for joining us as well, Kay. So we have some questions that we prepped in advance that I'll be asking our panelists. And also I want to invite you, if you're watching live, to ask questions. You can leave a comment either on the YouTube or Facebook Live, and we should be able to see those questions and comments here as well. So if you have a question, please ask it, and at the end, we'll try to get to them. I first want to ask our panel, why do you feel called to this work? Why do you feel called to help, especially trans and non-binary folk, find a spiritual home or spiritual care or spiritual comfort? Why do you personally feel called to this work? I'm going to try to make sure that the same person doesn't go first every time. So we'll start with Taylor on this one. So Taylor, why do you feel called to do the work that you do?
I think the easiest answer to that is that I'm of trans experience. And so it's one of those situations where what better way to do this work than to know that you're personally going to benefit from doing this work. So knowing the personal struggle of what it looks like to not have community in that way, you don't want other people to feel that. Even if you're impacting one person, that's still one person that doesn't feel without, and that has a soft place to land when things get hard. So I've since a very young age, I've been doing 2S LGBTQ plus advocacy work. I actually started before I even came out to myself. So I was like 14 years old when I first started doing this work. I am definitely 36 now. So over 20 years now, I've been doing work for the community. And yeah, that's just really the heart of it, is that if we can't build community in spaces where we're constantly pushed out, then we aren't going to survive. But there's no way that we're not going to survive, right? We're here and we're going to stay here. So if that means that we build it, then that's what it means.
I really liked what you said there about a soft place to go when things get hard. I really liked that. Was beautiful. Kay, how about you? Why do you feel called to this work?
Well, thank you, Taylor. You pretty much said what was on my heart. It's because there was nothing there for us. We felt abandoned, isolated. There was it was just I just want to make it a better place for other people.
Right on. What about you, Pastor Jenny?
Kind of the same sentiment, and specifically as it relates to being in leadership at a faith community. I've dealt with a lot of rejection, and that's just as coming out as gay. And I have unfortunately also witnessed within the LGBTQ community the L's and the G's and the B's marginalizing our trans and non-binary siblings.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, I mean, I guess I'm just an idealist and naive and going, wait, we're all marginalized. Why would you want to marginalize a group even more? And so I'm trying to take those extra steps and learn and grow and embrace some of the people who even find rejection in the places that they shouldn't, in my view. I mean, no one should be rejected anywhere, but in the places you would expect that they'd be, that people would be welcome. I've seen it sometimes subtle, sometimes not. And so with that in the back of my mind, I try to make those extra efforts. And that's why I feel called specifically with this topic.
Thank you. So I want to talk about the why. Like, why should people even care about this? Why do churches need to be intentional about welcoming trans and non-binary folk? I hear people in some churches say, oh, well, we're a progressive church, trans and non-binary and two-spirit folk are more than welcome to come. But it's the intentionality aspect that a lot of churches are missing. So why do churches need to be intentional about welcoming trans, non-binary, and two-spirit folk? Okay, why don't you start us off?
Absolutely. Intentional is the key word. If I hear one more church say, "Oh, we welcome everybody," well, maybe, but not so much. I just want to slap people when I hear that, because they'll say they're welcoming, yet they don't lead. Excuse me, let people share in their leadership experience. They don't let them deal with children's or youth groups, uh, and they've got all these restrictions that, yeah, you're welcome, but you can't get married in our church, and our pastor can't perform the ceremony. Well, that is not welcoming and affirming. And so intentionality is the key, and churches need to be intentional. They need to put the rainbow flag on their bulletins. They need to put it on their website, and I mean the inclusive pride flag that includes everybody, not just LGBT folks. So intentionality is the key. So don't say you're open and affirming or welcoming if you don't really mean it.
Yes, and in that same vein, don't put the rainbow flag all over your website if you're not really being welcoming and affirming.
Amen. Amen.
Yes. Jenny, what are your thoughts, Pastor Jenny?
Jenny's fine. I think a lot of it goes to the why. Why are you making the statement that you're welcoming and affirming? And the intentionality has to go beyond, yes, we're doing this, to why are you bringing people in or making these efforts to create your own special projects where, oh, we'll love them till they get it right.
Or you're just trying to boost your membership numbers?
Right. Are you just trying to check off a box, or are you really, really wanting people to absorb the love of God or whatever the message is? And I think the reason it's so important ties first, well, one, with that whole marginalization concept, is that if we're not intentional, we can easily kind of go the other way. I thought I was very welcoming and affirming to all, until it was pointed out to me that due to our space rental, whatever stuff, at the time we weren't allowed to change the bathroom signs. And I was like, but that's okay, because I make sure to tell all the new people it's okay. We don't care which one you use. I mean, that's a step, but that's not a big enough step. So now, after working with the landlord and getting him on board, and now I'm finally can order restroom signs that just say restroom. And I know that might be small, and to even some folks that I would say that would impact, that might not be a big deal. But it's again one of those intentional, important things to say, no, I'm putting my money where my mouth is. This is real, and I'm not messing around. So that's why I think intent and being intentional is important.
Thank you. And Taylor, what are your thoughts?
I think a lot of churches are perceived to welcome all and just serve most. And I think that that's kind of the crux of where that change needs to be, in that if you're serving the people and the communities that are pushed farthest to the margins, then you are truly serving all. So it's welcoming all and serving all. And I think too, just making sure that there's gender diverse perspectives in your work and what you're doing, it makes a huge impact. So a cisgender person isn't going to see the world through the same lens as a person who is trans, non-binary, two-spirit, gender diverse in general. And so for instance, like the example that Jenny just gave, for a cisgender person to see a bathroom sign, it's like, well, I'm going to go to the bathroom that I need to go to. For a person who is gender diverse, that's like, that could actually just turn into a panic attack, and then your whole day is lost. And even if the church means well, you might not see them come back into that door over something that seems so small, but the impact is so huge. And historically speaking, gender diverse people have had to deal with adversity and oppression and things that are just unimaginable. And when you are able to take that knowledge and create a better world so that it doesn't repeat itself, that's the important part of intentionality. And it's going to just create a better world for everyone, and not just trans, non-binary, two-spirit, gender diverse folks. You're muted, Tim. Sorry.
Yeah, I was on mute for all that. I know, that was swell. So Taylor, I have a follow-up question for you. So given your role as the youth organizer for Freedom Oklahoma, I'm wondering if you could also talk to a little bit about why it's important that churches be intentional about welcoming trans and non-binary children and youth into their Sunday school or religious education programs.
Excellent question, Tim. I love this question. So a lot of times youth are perceived to be performative. So, and that's just not the case. Their perspective, their voice, what they can bring to the table is so important to the work that we're doing. And also, because so many systems aren't set up to actually serve youth, they're often the ones that are harmed the most by the choices that adults are making for them. So youth specifically who are of trans experience are 3 times more likely to be affected by suicidality. And that's in the state of Oklahoma versus the national rate. So that means that 60% of our 2S LGBTQ plus Oklahoman youth have experienced like ideation or attempted. And that's because they don't have those support systems at home. They don't feel like they have those support systems at school. And another top place where they can find a support system is within faith communities, especially in the state of Oklahoma. So making sure that there are youth programs and even positions within the church itself, not just within youth programs, where youth voice can be heard, can make a huge impact on the livelihood of a young person here in Oklahoma. And that's also just going to trickle down, right? So you're going to see thriving youth within our communities if there's even just one place of support that they can get what they need, and it be actually based on the needs that they have, not what we think their needs are. So yeah, youth, integral part.
Amen to that, Taylor. Thank you for that. So our next question is to all of our panelists are, what are the top 3-ish things churches can do to become more welcoming to trans, non-binary, and two-spirit folk? I want to make sure folks who want to can leave with some action items they could try to do. at their places of worship. So, what, in your mind and from your perspective, are the top 3 things churches can do to become more welcoming to trans, non-binary, and two-spirit folk? Jenny, I'm going to start with you on this question.
Sure. I mean, to break it down tactically, for us, one of the top things is changing bathroom signs, something that basic. And then the top tier staff members can lead by example whenever you introduce yourself to someone. Not just a mistake I made early on, not just someone you think might have pronouns different than you might expect. Every time you introduce yourself at that door, hi, I'm Pastor Jenny, she, her. And it doesn't even have to be a big question. What are your pronouns? By saying it that way, it normalizes pronouns. And we're hearing that more and more. And, I'm getting better at it. I'm not going to pretend to be perfect, but the whole normalizing and not singling out or trying to ask certain people to feel like a project. So those are 2 of the big things would be like the signage and the pronouns. And then aside from that, something Taylor touched on when they were talking is essentially assess the needs. Ask folks what the needs are. Don't just assume, oh, if you identify as non-binary, you must want this or that's patronizing. And so those are the top 3, I would say.
Thank you. Taylor, what about you? Your thoughts?
I think a big thing that churches could do to show up for gender diverse individuals is to not tokenize them. And so what I mean by that is have them on your staff, have them in significant roles in the church, pay them for their time. Don't just assume that they're able to do this out of the kindness of their heart. Emotional labor is real, and having to educate people constantly about your own lived experiences can be extremely taxing. Make sure that several people of the 2S LGBTQ plus community are on your board, not just one, several. And so just making sure that you're actually integrating what those needs are. A lot of churches are known for community service and for giving and things like that. So just making sure that you're not gatekeeping those services and saying there's only one way that you can get these things. So if you're a church known to do a food bank, or you're known to do prison support, if there are different things that you're doing, make sure that you're touching on gender diverse people and recognizing that their obstacles are probably significantly higher to getting those services than just any other person. And being able to remove those barriers is extremely important. I think that was technically only 2, but it felt like there were 5 within that too. So I'm going to leave it there. But yeah, so just again, I'll reiterate to listen to the needs and then actually fulfill them and not lean back on, well, that's going to be difficult. Yeah, it's going to be difficult, but it's going to be better for everyone once we get to the other side.
And not to fall back into we've always done it this way. I've been encouraging my church that instead of saying, well, we used to, or how we usually do, I will now say in years past, so how can we move from beyond what, the inertia that our congregations have? Kay, what are your thoughts? What are the top 3 things churches can do?
Well, Taylor and Jenny pretty much stole all my thunder. But, the bottom line is affirmation, acceptance, and inclusion. If you use that as your filter, your church filter, you're going to include every single person and intentionally include trans, non-binary, LGBTQ plus folks in everything you do. Yeah, I mean, we're a small church. Our little First Congregational is very small. We have a pastor and we pay an organist, but so we don't have a lot of money to pay folks for their time, but include folks. The other thing is to educate your congregation, and please do not expect transgender, and non-binary folks to educate your congregation. But please invite them to tell their story because that is incredibly important. Congregations need to hear, I mean, especially if 80% are cisgender straight folks, they need to hear those stories, but don't expect them to do the educating. Um, and our pastor does, I know all the superficial things like wearing an inclusive rainbow shawl, putting that on the altar to signal to anybody who might come in the door that we are indeed, we're there for you. Visibility really does matter. And if those things are missing, then that person's going to turn right around and probably never come back. So you want to signal to folks that you are indeed a welcome place. So yeah, put your money where your mouth is, right, Jenny? That's exactly my sentiment as well.
And so, once again, I was on mute. So I want to also share a few things I've seen out there. So at the churches I've served currently in past, we have name tags. We are a church of name tags, right? And you can buy little circular dots that have pre-printed pronoun stickers, pre-printed pronouns on them. So we have pronoun stickers that we've handed out to all of our congregants to put on their name tags. And that's a small, not too expensive thing that helped us, put our money where our mouth was. I also encourage you to, if you have relationships with trans, non-binary, two-spirit folk who are already in your congregations, see about asking if they want to serve as an usher or greeter. It's a great visible way, especially, with some denominations, they may not be able to have a role in a Sunday morning worship service, for example. But they might be able to serve as ushers and greeters. And they might be able to serve as children and youth religious education volunteers, teachers, small group leaders, whatever your denomination likes to call it. Especially in our youth group, I love having genderqueer and other GLBTQ plus folks serve as youth advisors for our high school youth because they can, so they know they have someone they can talk to. And so try getting, especially with children and youth, try boosting your volunteer numbers there. With folks from gender and sexual orientation diversity. And so I want us to move into what kind of advice do we have to give folks? I want to start off with advice for allies. And then later we're going to talk about advice specifically for queer folk because those can be different, right? But let's start with allies. And what are some ways allies can support their churches? Allies and cisgender folk can support their churches in becoming more welcoming. And for that, Kay, I actually like to start with you as an ally on the panel. What are some things that your fellow allies can do to help their churches become more welcoming?
They can do a lot of things. They can encourage their churches to march in the pride parades. Norman has a pride parade. There are 2 in Oklahoma City. We went to one in Eufaula last weekend. So June is all about pride. Transgender Day of Visibility. Celebrate that. Celebrate. We often do a transgender Day of Remembrance in our worship service. So those are things that allies can get involved with and invite others in the LGBTQ plus community to join and lead those if they wish. But I'll reiterate, visibility matters and those actions matter.
Jenny, do you have any suggestions for allies? I'm reading myself off mute now. Sorry. All right.
You're okay. This is my favorite question. And it may come across a little harsh, but I'm just going to be a little blunt. If you consider yourself an ally and you are, and you're at a church that you've tried to get to do things, yes, get involved, get things. But if you discover that your church, and to an extent even your denomination, if they just are not affirming, and you truly consider yourself an ally, get out. Find a place that is. We
Absolutely.
can't all create them, you know. Like, Kay, it was an awesome blessing creating a space in Norman, and we can't all create them. But really, if we're talking about putting our money where our mouth is,
Mhm.
stop giving your money to these places that want to tokenize people. And I'm not talking, we all learn and grow and can change and go for it. But if you're at a place that specifically says no, you can't get married if this, or no, you can't be on the praise team, or whatever, especially if you are in this community. If you're in the LGBTQ community going to a non-affirming church, I mean, it's your decision. You're not, I don't want to condemn anyone, but it's just, it makes it a little tough to then say, oh, I'm an ally.
And Kay, it looks like you had something you wanted to add.
I just want to jump out of my skin, Jenny, because that is exactly the crossroads at which we arrived. It felt so hypocritical. It felt so hypocritical, and I felt like a hypocrite. I kept saying to myself, "Oh, I'm going to make things better in this church," but it was the wrong signal to send to everybody.
Mm,
So thank you
mm.
for saying that.
Powerful point. Powerful points. Taylor, any thoughts on what allies should be doing or can be doing?
Yeah, so I am a person who believes that there's not really a way to be a passive ally. So if you are only doing it silently, then it's not actually serving the people that it needs to serve. So if your place of faith decides that it's something that they only want to do so that only the community knows about it, that might not be the place for you, because then when it comes down to the wire, there's a really good chance that they're not going to show up for you against adversity within the community outside of those walls. And I think just agreeing with what Kay and Jenny has already said, in that there's um, there's no value in serving a place that isn't serving you, and it's really easy to continue in that mentality of, well, that's not what they meant, or they're trying, or and just getting into the space of apologizing for an organization or people who are not actually serving the people they say that they are. And that does so much harm to yourself. If that's not how you believe, if that's not where your morals and ethics and values lie, constantly wearing yourself down by, apologizing for people that aren't doing what's right in your own heart, doesn't serve you as much as it doesn't serve the 2S LGBTQ plus community. So it may be difficult to not have that community while you're in the flux of finding a new one, but know that you will find the community that fits you, and it's not going to be at your own detriment or at the harm of the community itself. So I think that would be the biggest thing, is that push forward, push out loud. And if there is no give, then it's not for you, and that's okay. Move on. You don't have to be the one that fixes everything, because one person can start a movement, but it takes more than one person to keep the movement going.
Well said. Well said. And so we've talked about advice for allies. What advice do we have specifically for queer, trans, non-binary, and two-spirit folks in lobbying their churches and becoming more welcoming? And Jen, I want to start with you. We already talked a little bit about this, but any other advice that you have?
Well, I think a lot of it is, for this, I'm going to kind of infer. I don't want to assume, because you know what that makes, but I can infer that if you're in a place that is affirming, and maybe we just aren't getting it quite right, or maybe we're a little too passive, or whatever. If there are things, I would say go to the top, talk to the leadership about what needs to change, or what things need to go forward. Or if you're in a church, maybe the church is welcoming and affirming and doing all it can, but the denomination is restrictive. Talk to the pastor, find out what they're doing and kind of attach to that. And if you feel it's worth that battle and worth doing it, go for it. But but go right to the top.
Absolutely. Taylor, any thoughts?
Just don't settle. It's okay to want more from your faith community, knowing that it can be difficult. And I think also a really important part of that is have it in writing. It doesn't have to be a situation. It's like, well, that we do the right thing here. Like, that the church serves you. Have them make it a part of their policy. Like, have it written down that this is truly an affirming space, and what it looks like to be affirming, not just to say that you are. And don't feel like just because you hold these identities, it's solely your responsibility to bring the church with you on that.
Yes.
The congregation it needs to do this together. It's a part of growing in your faith and in your community to make these changes together. You don't have to drag anyone along. You can find something that better serves you if that's not serving you now.
Right. Thank you.
Good point, Taylor. Thank you for that point.
And so, a question for the whole panel. I would love something I heard folks talk about, and Jenny, you definitely brought this up in your personal story, which was about healing from past spiritual harm, right? And that is deeply relevant for our two-spirit, non-binary, and trans communities, is healing from past spiritual harm. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, and how can we overcome the hurt, and how can we help others overcome the hurt? But yes, Jenny, go ahead. What are your thoughts?
Oh, okay. Thanks, Tim. The biggest thing I try to do is acknowledge the pain. Just acknowledge it. I'm not gonna fix anything. And then accept people on whatever journey they're on. I don't lash out at other belief systems, or people have different spiritual journeys. And personally, I believe it's all part of the same, but I don't want to get too deep into theology. But I, I just try to do my best to allow people to be themselves, rather than look at it as recruiting. And no, we're not. My thing I hate is, well, we're not like those churches. Okay, well, hopefully you're not, or why would you need to exist? If every church was the same, we're redundant. But I I think, in helping people with their healing, it takes kindness and just love and acknowledgement of, yes, that pain is real and it's deep and it hurts, and I'm here. I'm not, there are no magic words. There's just, yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Okay, what are your thoughts? How can we help folks overcome the hurt that they may have experienced at churches before?
Well, I so appreciate Taylor and Jenny's comments, and as a straight ally and the mom voice in the room, that pain hurts the entire family. That um, that faith assassination hurts the entire family, and I think it's important for not only our LGBTQ plus loved ones, but our straight allies to acknowledge that we all hurt when that happens. And there's nothing worse than a parent watching their kid be hurt. Uh, that is not okay. That is not okay. So, Jenny, I appreciate you saying that you have to acknowledge it, and it's okay to say you damaged my family. And so we're getting away from you. It's kind of like divorcing in a really toxic relationship. It's not much different than that. And that's what we had to, as a family, acknowledge. And the fallout was that, of our three kids, only one of them goes to church, or has that connection because it just runs that deep.
I want to thank you for sharing that, Kay. I think that is a lot more common than folks know. Thank you. Oof, powerful. Taylor, do you have any thoughts?
I mean, I think what Ginny and Kay both said is really impactful. I think the one thing that I would add to it is just meeting people where they are, and there not being strings attached to that. So just like Ginny said, like, we're all on our own journey. We all have our different points of healing. We may have acknowledged it, we may not have, but that doesn't stop us at like within faith communities from being able to show up, meet people where they are, see where we can help, if we can help, and they're just not being strings attached to that of like membership or you're going to do this thing for our church or things like that. That isn't what's necessary. It is about unconditional love. And I think that so much of mutual aid and community building can be centered in that.
Thank you. We have a question from one of our commenters. Could you define fully affirming? And how would one be able to find out if the faith community is in fact fully affirming?
You call them and ask them. I was asked to give a recommendation on a particular church, and were they gay friendly or open and affirming? And I picked up the phone and called their office, and it was clear in the first 30 seconds of the phone call because I asked, "Oh, can my gay son, be in your choir, or can he do this or that?" And it was the litmus test, and they failed miserably. So my advice is pick up the phone and call them.
And in my experience as a religious educator, one of the questions you can ask, like, can they be in the choir? Can they serve as a children's RE teacher or education teacher?
Right.
That will also give you a very good idea if they're truly affirming or not.
Right.
So, open question for everybody. Where are some places that you can find? How can you find some open and affirming churches if you don't want to call every church in Oklahoma City? Jenny, how can we find some?
There are some resources online. You can use keywords in Google with the location and even gay church or affirming church. There's I don't necessarily want to go into specifics here, but there are places that focus on clarity and focus, and then you can check out websites that, one of the things we try to do at Evolve is put it right out there. Hey, Evolve is LGBTQ affirming, fully affirming, and inclusive. And then even after that, you might want to throw an email or something and say, what does that mean? Because unfortunately, yeah, it can be different. When I'm asked specifically to me if we're fully affirming, I say, well, I'm the senior pastor and my wife would get pretty upset if I wasn't. Um, so that's how that works for me. But I know that little line doesn't work for everyone. All you, Taylor.
Yes, Taylor, your thoughts.
I was just going to say also, I think that it's really important for you as a person to kind of make a checklist of what you feel like needs to be in place for a church to feel affirming to you, because it obviously can look very different. But I think too, like, a really important question is, if you decided to have a commitment ceremony or get married to your partner, would you would they be willing to do that? Are they going to participate in events, like public events that are to us LGBT plus affirming? Are they going to provide, any sort of mutual aid that they provide to other people, to us LGBTQ plus Oklahomans? Those are all different ways that are like public, that would be really important to feeling fully affirmed, because you're not just having to have this identity within these walls. But I would also just encourage people to think of it from the perspective of like, oh no, I just totally lost my train of thought. I'm so sorry. It was really important. It was such a good point. Just pretend like I said it. It'll come
No
back to
worries,
me.
Taylor.
Thanks.
Taylor, that was phenomenal.
Yes. Another question that you could ask is, when is the last time this church marched at the Pride Parade or had a booth at the Pride Festival?
I remember what I was going to say. I was going to tie it back. That's why it's really important to have things in writing, to have policies that show what it looks like to be affirming. Thank you. Good job. We did it all together.
All right. So I want to end by giving each of our panelists a time of what is the final takeaway or takeaways that you hope people watching this take away? Where do you hope that people leave this after they've watched this? What do you hope they leave feeling, thinking, doing? And we'll start with the order of our introduction. So Jenny, would you start us off? What do you hope people leave? What do you hope their takeaways are?
Well, it really depends on the person. For faith community leaders who are trying to intentionally make those steps, I hope they leave with some ideas and also with the knowledge that, be careful not to tokenize people. Remember, it's up to you to educate yourself, and there are resources like this live stream and things like that. And if you have relationships, which hopefully you are built, you have relationships with two-spirit and gender diverse people that you can, talk to if the relationship permits it. But it's kind of up to you to do that, to reach out to peer groups and do things like that. But that there are some, even smaller steps you can do, and maybe some things you thought of, and maybe some things you haven't. For members of the community, the LGBTQ2S plus community, I think they got out of that some nuggets on the importance of standing up for yourself and not allowing yourself to be run over, and that you have that absolute right to make decisions that are in your own best interest, spiritually, physically, mentally, and all of that. So that's what I hope for.
All right. We'll go to Taylor. What sort of takeaways do you hope people leave with?
I hope that 2S LGBT plus people know that they don't have to make themselves smaller to fit into a space that may not serve them, that they can absolutely find the community that they're looking for that serves what they're needing to fulfill themselves, like spiritually or within their faith. I hope that allies can see that whatever uncomfortability they may be facing by showing up as an ally, it is much worse for a person who actually holds those identities that are part of the 2S LGBTQ plus community. So your uncomfortability isn't more important than somebody else's well-being. And that the people who are in charge of those or over those faith organizations realize exactly what Jenny pretty much already said, is just that they've been called to serve, and that means to serve all, and not at the expense of a community. So making sure that you're doing your due diligence and truly like educating yourself and not solely relying on the congregants within your community to do that for you.
All right, thank you. And Kay, what sort of takeaways do you hope people leave with?
Well, I think I'd like to say, if you're an ally and you want your church to do better and truly be open and affirming and embracing, I hope you will pray with your feet. Action is the strongest word you can use. So I don't really care if you're sitting in your pew praying that things will get better. I want you to get up and do something, make it better.
Everyone can think trans and non-binary folk are welcome, but if nobody's doing anything about it, nothing's ever going to happen.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now, I want to encourage folks who are trying to do the work of changing their churches and faith communities, whether in leadership or as a lay member, you are not alone. reach out to other churches, even if they are not in your denomination. That's okay, because you can talk about how to best go about doing this work. And we'll be able to share ideas and share support as you try to transform your faith communities and churches. I hope we get to a place where we never have to have a panel like this again, where all the churches already are welcoming to trans, non-binary, and two-spirit folk, right? So may this be the beginning of the end of these kinds of panels, right? Let's all commit to take some action over the next month or two to help make our churches a more welcoming place. Last chance for any final thoughts from our panelists. If not, I really want to thank Kay from PFLAG and First Congregational Church down in Norman. I want to thank Jenny from Evolve OKC. I want to thank Taylor from Freedom, Oklahoma for joining us. Again, my name was Tim Atkins from the First Unitarian Church of Oklahoma City on behalf of the Religions United panel of the Oklahoma Council of Churches. That was a lot of syllables in a row, folks. All right. But I want to thank you all for being here. And be on the lookout for more panels from the Religions United group as well, if you enjoyed this panel. And you will be able to catch them wherever you caught this as well. So thank you all for being here, and thank you for joining us.